Thank you so much. Tyler, how long am I reading for?
About 15.
Okay. These poems are long, so we will see how many fit in 15 minutes. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a total pleasure and a real delight to be able to be in conversation with my colleague, Leia. I also wanted to say that if you're supporting writers and books, if you buy a book here in the bookstore tonight, I have some copies of the Book of Scab that I'd be happy to give you for free. Or if you're watching online and you order from Ampersand, which you can do, let me know. You can find me easily. And I can send you a free copy of the Book of Scab or maybe one of my other titles that you may not have, because we love writers and books and we want to support them big time. Okay, so I started this book in March of 2016, and then it came out in March of 2025, which felt like a bad fever dream of March 2016. It's very much a book about underworlds and what kind of happens when you're returning from the underworld. You've had your journey through the underworld and you surface and you've got bills to pay and your friends forgot you and life is not gentle with you, and sort of looking around and saying, okay, what's like that thin strand of hope that really keeps us going? Who's our community? Where do we turn, and where's like our tenderness for each other? So it's been actually kind of a pleasure buoying to me to read from this book over the past year. It's in long prose sections with a lot of words. So we'll start at the beginning and then we'll just see where we go in the narrative. It's more or less a novel with no plot. You go back to get your holy things when your skin has greater parts sun than air, and stop touching your bitter friends. It's true, once married, I had to go to the underworld for a really long time, after which I came to live above the biotoxic soil crust, but not with you or anyone. The titles are quite long. Two-shaped, ivy-covered, twice kindred, feast, eat something, a partition, and watch yourself come back to life, a life whose door is guarded by a seabird. Froth your skin, kicked to shore. Or, I wasn't a sea creature nor drowned, I was lover. I came to the sea and demanded entry to the borderless places because they shift, they aren't territory. I asked to leave my nation state. I asked to be a bride dissolved, to be sick and then, well, on shore, I couldn't explain that my heart was a hospital, in a hospital gown, in a hospital. I couldn't explain that pain was sex and one has only both. When you had me, I couldn't explain what I had done with that, done with the way I had to encounter my name shaped on the public tongue. Or, my name was, I left my holy things at the gibbous ridge and climbed over, keeping everyone alive with my ability to turn flesh to milk. I was not myself considered holy then. It was obvious that I was just doing my job. I cooled your hot spirit with materialism. It wasn't me. I came in on a raft. I dove off the prairie. I alone. I swam all those miles to the sea, passing no other sea, passing through every gate, gatehouse, and checkpoint. Each time my heart, lonely whale in a bone cavern, wet ossuary, starved out, strung up, there was so much air and so little oxygen. I breathed you in through a golden straw. I spun your hair to gold, to reed, to straw. How pliant. Or, don't talk to gods. Don't put your ear to the source code, switches, shell, to bind, dispel. Don't read aloud the formula of a virus if you don't want to be a virus. Don't vow and sing. All night Your friends were on the velvet crest of a spring damp hill, and their names were just sitting there, fresh. Animals stole away the night, cells released from your gown, and rails from so many syringes you lost count. I lost count. The needle had been in me such a long time, and then I went under. I didn't have the agriculture to ask where I'd been. No longer had to answer my phone, nor to anyone, not with my name, at least not correctly any longer. Anything other than that, yes, I was down there. Longer. Harpies came out of my rib cage, and sometimes a species would drip from above where people killed it. Machines and bad ideas, sometimes a gust of hot wind through the line, though my lines were dead. I shut Magic's face so it wouldn't call my name. I shut it like a box you can fuck with, but you can't. There are a lot of children in this book. I dwell in the road to the sea everyone travels, and dwell in your house preparing to haunt you if I'm not doing much later, and dwell on your face, and if you don't agree with me, I or my daughters might could come back. When you go to the door of the sea god's house, also my house, a place I dwelled, guarded by a seabird who doesn't stop for pain, who heats fire, rocks in a trash dugout, drops hots into your gut, a cooked meal that bakes you from the inside and parts each blind's holy hide, a night bird who cocks the moon until it's soft and shoots it into you, a syringed-mouthed, glistening jelly moon potion shot into your coal heart like a bubble. A songbird stacking sand notes, taking notes, flushed countenance says bird. This guy's wreck and mealsome says garbage like a chime that brings, bearings, rings, all the birds to the yard. Or I won't go down when you come my face, guarded door where I keep time. I keep time lashed like a daughter and trade her for my actual daughter standing in the ditch by the road to the sea everyone must travel. I don't want her to obey you, and I don't want her to obey me. I want her to be a bad daughter, all legs climbing out of the squabble oven and over the crust of a crater bored into earth. Do not bore my daughter, or she will flay you. She unspools a strip of time, the poisoned peel. She doesn't eat it, wiser than I at her age. By her age, I had a husband, had to spit my red mouthfuls at his guests' feet. My chores included serving them my unguarded smile and ungirding my hospitality without enjoying the Congress or its session. I hid, wore my knees, but not for him, lace habit. In the shaft of time, I'm laced in revolution around my daughters, my bad habits every day. This belief that pain must be included in my greedy hold on time's mealy core. Slow core, sad core, revolution of flesh that can't keep juice, so turns rugged and greasy, stewed, hard winter venison, a long ago husband, double fisting antler and throat. This leather game falls back in the sand. If you don't want to go to the underworld, go underwater. No hot god will fool you, going deep out in salt layers where the ribbed gown of sea tides, salt stiff, white bridal habit worn by you, call out none, acolyte, you call them daughters, and they turn off their phones. I can't remember how men got my number after I gave it up on the makeshift altar, altered it on my knees, a dull classic, ropes saying the grace of each knot, forbidding beautiful images lined up for record, and by the time they turn their turn to come, beauty's convulsions give over to something we don't recognize. Or Fertile sound of wave that carries wreck on rock, irritating your ear where birds wheel too close by, checking you for doneness, done in, give up, or I don't want this for you. I wanted to give you sight through a new lens. Mine? Drilled, cut deep, absorbing, you bathing unusual visage from the rocks. I observe your flesh before birds, splintered vessels and rusted shafts race my face, opening against your dry fire skin and the refraction of salt's infinite crystal patina. Auric from any angle, I had my arm out, coated in raw jewels, pulsing with favor, humming your favorite, not too worried about who has frankincense, who has benzoin out here on the weary hippie road, preserving sage, verbena, hardy mint, lavender, sticky in your crook, shush. Or if you don't want to go to the underworld, go out to the desert and don't look like that. Look back at me, your eyes smoked 4 nights, 2 crystals sewn deep in the mountain's hot thigh. I take a beak for a needle and tear out the stitches. What the fuck happened to you? I thought you were born. I thought we were on Earth. I thought this must be the place. But it had a false pedestal through which time, the holler guarded by, guarded, or so fucking many winged wheels of fortune bearing each the premonition of its own body, relic, and maybe mine, own death. My handler thereafter, you don't get to die and lie down, but get to be ravaged again by the wild hospital. Or salt and deep dirt loose to the murder wind was just feeling. Some other person put up your skin against mine. Teach me the true fact of hugging. Let me know. No, show. Show me how it's okay to have run the length of the road to the sea and the length of your body in my arms, restrained against the ground. Perform for me the embrace so I don't break against this shaft and go down, this astonishing shaft. The mechanism by which time swallows does it to us. Each time my daughter calls home a movie, she says, sorry, Mama, you don't get an invitation to the house of the dead exes, weeping salt on the inlet, its mouth afoam with rocks. Without falling down that shaft, you don't have to get it yet. You'll know us forever. We're ore. Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more. So this is one about friendship and springtime, which we could probably use in warmer weather. Where sound forms a bowl in the green, my beloveds congregate, and though a drone scripts threat overhead, we reap balm, ash, damp clover. It's true, time has 80 feet of hand-woven rope in its satchel. My tender friends make a list of what's missing. Stretch out in new grass, old sun, bodies in the middle of embodied time, performing the act of memory, a longing in the rough, in the warmest shaft. Sunlight, medicine, doubling as poison, waiting for its homeopathic moment, creasing a reminder into each palm, open. Your hand, what did you get? I ask each friend. Tell me how to do it. Tell me how to remember our starry youth. The horned god points to a row of beautiful lambs and says, I was them. I was just like them. Slights a handful of numbers to call, later doubles time, creases time until it's layered, and calls each combination like a tally or a sentence, and sometimes calls mine, but today the afternoon stretches long and I turn my face, scripted with mascara, patience, decades of sympathy. Or an empathetic frequency emitting both sound and light in this Demeter's palm. She's next to me. Hurrying quietly against the knoll, her mouth a harbor. We've wandered in from the road. Is this someone's temple, outmoded? Gods gather here in comfort, and everyone agrees the owners of the bar are sweethearts. The Japanese whiskey more special, the quail's eggs steeped in ginger and soy taste sunlit too. My tongue steps behind velvet. Wants nothing but the night's tongue, wants nothing but talking, begs for talking, wants nothing but all of you talking. I can suddenly smell the desert on my tender friend's skin, the cold copper childhood and the spark of the mall as it hits not the soft pine it expected, but hickory stump, rebar, anything altered by some father's hand. There aren't any fathers here today, raising their hands, saying me, my daughter. My bull-faced, childlike, tender friends at the bar, laughing, their bodies moving at the exact pace of the Earth's orbit, while I move on night's time, cold and planetary, and have lost everything but this memory and talking. Finally, I pulled the chain to darken the room into celestial stuff, the faint whir of streetlights, a weary redwood that doesn't belong here, mournful, distant. It considers our bodies through the window, mine. The ghost of its Proserpine and the ghost of its years hence astride, you. There's a tenderer name for you on my tongue. Want nothing but your field-drenched tongue. My mouth overflows with it as a horn that doesn't empty, whose roots are the sea, whose lip caught bright and wet in teeth, a wave against a still pleasant shore. The salt, lick it from me, and still I cannot know what I taste like. I ask my bull-faced tender friend, whose baleful eye creases at the corner, a private laughter. I say, we saw everyone today gather in the pasture on the far side of the road that everyone must travel, into a hidden, hide, shade in shade, risking hand to sunlight for a memory of peace. No one could guarantee it would be happy. In the palm, a fragment of a star long cooled. I couldn't remember the spells to names. I couldn't speak enough into each of their ears tightly. My breath hitched as it always has, the gasp that precedes knowing. I knew you. I put my hand to every shoulder, my palm cupping the ridged horn, my fingers describing an intimate gutter between blade and spine. And if I had a husband, I had him not. And if I a bride, I outwore her. And if I were welcome, still I borrowed every dime, a metaphor. I fill my phone with numbers. Everyone here has held death, a dry and still stone, has held death, a hot clay bead behind each eye, in the crease between the eyes, my bull-faced tender friend whose ring catches the sunlight, still, in whose eye there are both reflections and apertures telling stones that tell the time and the story. Or I roll over the grass, the elders don't mind if you go slack in a spell. The tender friends know you're on your back because you don't lie any longer. I don't lie still. I admit it's sex. I admit sex into my palm, a rain of memorable pearls. I wonder which is your beauty and which your shame. I wanted nothing but each of you ripe and risen, each of you talking directly against my tongue, your unblinking black salt tongues strewn with trying. They left us here, the retiring gods, and we had no reason to stay, no reason not to stay when the spell lifted and the sun set. I want nothing but your salt tongue pouring over me, your whisper that you needn't have whispered. Everyone must travel. It is the God's truth we all love, and the drone, our love, drones. It was you and me and our tender friends, and we could see where the sail lifted, but we could not see death or yet. Thank you. This is a seat where I sit and make cuckoo bananas faces that Tyler captures forever.
It is like quite bright in the seat.
It's really bright.
I feel watched.
Yeah.
No, that does not help me feel watched. Hi. What's your sign?
I'm an Aries.
An Aries.
With Scorpio rising and Capricorn moon.
Okay, I'm a Libra, but I don't know enough to know what rising and moon.
We will figure it out.
But I have some questions about the book. So you have an abundance of natural and also supernatural things that are happening in the book. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the ritual of those two things.
Yeah.
And what draws you to those as sort of like an underworld place.
Yeah. So in some ways the book is really literal. I wrote it very quickly in the spring of 2016 when I was living in Joshua Tree, California, and our house butted up against BLM land, so like just big open space where there were hikers and meth heads and mattresses and wildflowers, and everything was kind of all mixed together. And I had really rough things going on in my body and my personal life, in my career, and the nation had really rough things going on. And I just like couldn't feel grateful. Like I wanted to practice gratitude. I wanted to heal. I wanted to get better. I wanted to do right by my kids, all of these things. And it was just so hard to access any of it. So I was like in a real fake it till you make it phase. And so I was literally just like going out and touching things and being like, I appreciate this thing. I am touching benzoin. And I was fortunate to have a really nice community out there, a lot of whom were like doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it didn't, sometimes it felt hollow in the moment, or it didn't feel like it was working yet, but then it was also just so weird there.
Yeah.
Like there were so many intersections of culture and nature and space, and just like the literal, like the biotoxic soil crust was helping me heal from chronic illness stuff I was dealing with. And so sometimes you'd be having this moment that probably was natural, but felt really otherworldly. And I think one of the things I was sort of figuring out was that like ritual isn't for me about the ritual, feeling really magical and important every time I'm doing it. Ritual is about the routine and the practice and like kind of carving new neural pathways, and like if there's a spiritual equivalent, carving a new spiritual pathway, just like getting to a place where I could believe things I couldn't yet believe or imagine. And so instead of like, being like, oh, well, this is like cheesy or new agey, or being like sour about it not working, I just kind of like, I kept at it. And then when these poems hit, they became like part of that ritual and that practice. I did them for a poem a day. So like if you ever get to April and you're like, I don't want to write a poem a day, it's so artificial and ridiculous, I've gotten like 4 books that way. So do it every time, and also maybe just put all your talking in it.
I love that. What's your favorite ritual? Or your favorite part of a writing practice that you consider something you do maybe across all the books?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my favorite part of the poetry writing ritual, and I know this all the more because I started writing fiction this year, and it's not nice.
Yeah. Why isn't it nice?
It's so my favorite part of the writing ritual is when you're writing poetry and you like literally feel your language center shift in your head, And the poetry, like the centers of the brain we use to write poetry are just more psychedelic places. And they give you nice chemicals, and I don't know, they're surely like a self-soothing method for me. But they just also like, they open a space where I kind of like, I have more perspective, or I have access to a broader array of images and thoughts and feelings. So I think my favorite part of the ritual, and I don't always know how to trigger it, it just kind of like, I try things and hopefully I get there. And that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
Like when you switch to that more oracular space.
Yeah, the kind of discovery of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also I really like, for this time of year, I really like the ritual of making Bridget's crosses with rushes and folding them, and like how tactile that is. And it just, when you hang them up over your door, it just kind of stays for the year. And yeah, maybe it's like a material way to get into that space.
Yeah, love that. I really enjoyed how fluid your poems are, and there's a lot of interruptions in them, almost, where you're telling a story and then you interrupt yourself with a new story, and sometimes you go back to the first story, and sometimes you don't, which is totally fine. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how kind of rupture and interruption and maybe the ecstatic is working in there, if that makes any kind of sense.
Now I'm looking at my poor family. Who I feel like has to live with this on a regular basis, or who communicates in the same fashion because I raised them.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah. This book probably does that more than any book I've ever written before. I think I do always do that. In part, like I come from a culture of interrupters and collaborative communicators, which I know can seem quite rude, and can be very speedy. But for me as a kid in a difficult family, I think it was one of the few pleasures was that topics could switch so quickly, or one story could lead to another unexpectedly. And in this book, I think I was so indignant about so much, and I had so much underdelivered speech. And then I kept being so surprised to find that like I was also like really like tender-hearted at the time. Yeah. And so I felt very made of talking, and I felt like stanzas weren't working for me because it wasn't like a line break. It really was like I was interrupting myself over and over again, and I didn't want to have to stop that because it seemed like it was almost the point. Right. And so I just kind of was like, what happens if I really let the rupture and interruption roll until maybe I'm empty? Yeah. Was there ever a time that you felt empty while you were reading these poems back to yourself? Is that a weird question to ask? No, that's a really good question. Not empty, but like how sometimes you can hit an equilibrium, or like you feel the harmony, or you get kind of still. Yeah. Like when I knew one was over, I would get that click, and I could like breathe a little better for a minute. I don't know, does that happen when you write? Do you because you do a lot of really rambunctious things with language and image, and of course you teach at the Gateway to the Underworld much more than I do. Leia teaches our necromancy course, which is a huge hit with our students, and also just like really vital practice in this moment. I don't know, does that happen for you? Do you hit a place where... I guess sometimes I think of it kind of like channeling multiple voices. I don't believe in like a god or anything like that. But I feel like you can fill yourself up with a lot of different voices and a lot of different stories. And it does feel loud sometimes. So that's kind of
what I hear you saying a little bit too.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's always really, really loud in my head,
Yeah.
and there's lots going on. And like my partner will attest that as I get more tired toward the end of the day, I start like tangenting and having really long bits that I have to do in the middle of perfectly mundane conversations.
Yeah.
So like the poems like can hold that weight.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do any somatic exercises when you're doing your own writing?
No, I mean, I love C.A. Conrad
Yeah.
so much. I love them, and I love their practices. And actually, they were really important for this book. I don't know if I've even told them this, but they sent me this email when, you know, they knew things were very, very rough for me and that I had a long road ahead of me. And they sent me this sort of like chant or speech that you had to repeat aloud every day, and it was going to bring you abundance, but like weird abundance.
Okay.
So it wasn't like, oh, you'll get wealth or you'll get fame or whatever. It was like, you will get so much weird shit. And I was like, maybe that is a good path for me. So I read this thing every day out loud to myself, and it was one of those rituals where I was like kind of hollow, but we'll see what happens. And so I do think that helped with this. Most of the time, I think, like as a person with chronic illness and chronic pain, I think so much of my day is a somatic exercise, and I'm managing so much of the time that like thinking in poetry became a way for me to help balance my body. So I would never think of it as like I'm doing something on purpose. I think it's just part of my like ecosystem.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. You mentioned that the book was a novel without a plot. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you see it as a novel, or how the structure of it came about.
Yeah. You know, I don't really know, because I was doing a poem a day, and I really was writing like one of these almost every day. And then I think I had a few left to fill in. It was a lot of words to write in a month. So I was kind of just telling the story of my days, but I was telling them in such a surreal fashion. Which, like, to me probably felt pretty literal because I was being, you know, my own dramatic self. But there were characters, and there was all of this mythology in there, and sort of saying like, okay, what parts of mythology am I revisiting? And so like this road, going back and forth on this road became kind of like the plot or the anti-plot or something. Like if you're going back and forth on this circuit between life and death so many times, right? Like, does that actually advance the story and what happens to the characters? And as the spring went on, I was getting healthier, and I was shifting some things for work and family and everything else that I had to shift. And I don't know that the nation was feeling that much better, but we were enduring, and we were still being good to each other. And like sometimes I'd have those weekends where we're like all calling Kamala Harris, or like we're burning stuff in the backyard just to feel something or whatever it was. So as those went on, I was like, oh yeah, that's the story, right? The story is you're this person who's normal, right, has been blown up, which is where most novels start, right? Like that's your inciting incident. And then how you manage that and who you are and how you relate to others is kind of like, for me, these are some of the best stories, right? Is like, who is a person when they're at their limit for what they can manage and handle, and how do they treat the people around them, and like who do they become in a moment where they really logically should lack grace, and how do you still access that? So for me, it's just kind of a story about like, you know, what happens when you're bottoming out and you're in a really, really bad place, and you make whatever effort you can to kind of like stay buoyant in it, to witness and stay aloft, which like, it doesn't maybe make the best narrative arc if you don't have the rest of the plot points.
No,
but it felt like a novel to me.
I think survival is enough of a narrative arc in and of itself. I don't think you need more than that.
Yeah, no, it is. It's plenty. What is it? Christina Rivera says, she says, don't kneel at the altar of plot.
Yeah.
Right? And I love that, because she's, you know, wins a Pulitzer, her fiction writer, Christina Rivera Garza, and, you know, that she's saying to students, like, yeah, like, don't let plot be your god, because that's not the whole story.
Yeah.
Maybe we should see any questions from the audience. Got anything?
Yeah. Just 2 questions. The first is, this is a bit of a selfish question.
Oh, good.
I'm glad you're talking about 30-30, by the way. It's like, oh, right, that's like a thing you can do to jumpstart things.
Yeah.
But yeah, like procrastinating. How do you deal with procrastination?
Yeah.
Or just being like too busy for creative work?
Yeah.
And then I don't remember what the other question was, so we'll go with that.
That's a good question, and that is real. You know, I'm on my first ever sabbatical. You know, I've been out of degree programs and teaching since 2008, and this is my first sabbatical. And I'm still so busy. But I think for me, a little bit poetry is kind of a way to procrastinate. So right now, when my job is also to write prose, I'm like, but what?
This is the struggle.
Yes.
I'm working on essays.
Yes.
You procrastinating on them poems.
Yes. So my trick for prose so far, and I've only got like 20,000 words of this book done, that like I feel like are usable words. But my trick has just been to like do it in bite-sized pieces, to remind myself what I say to my students all the time, which is like, I made a world for myself that is so much better than most of the things I have to think about most of the time, even when it's unpleasant in there. And so like, if I just go sit in a chapter, I will write words. Words will happen. I will put them on the page. I don't have to do a lot every day. You know, sometimes I take myself for a really long walk and I say, fine, you're just gonna like think about nothing but that project, and that inevitably turns into language I can get on the page. But yeah, it's definitely, it requires more discipline than, I just think poets, we were on to something. We made a really smart choice, and I just don't think we get the same kind of like happy neurotransmitters out of prose. So you have to kind of like, you have to sort of hack your reward system for it. But I think also like, right, remembering, you know, remembering that bit about undelivered speech, right? Like I wouldn't be writing prose if there wasn't something that I hadn't yet articulated that I felt really driven to say, and it has to be said in prose. And so I'm going to get it done. Hi, Anne.
Hi. This is a very short question.
Oh, yay.
And I've been sitting here trying to figure out how to like gussify it up and see if it's and then in isolation, there's a lot of meta discourse around the question itself.
Yeah.
or introduce it. And
This is very nice.
I just want to ask about ore.
Yeah.
Can you talk about ore?
Yeah.
So much ore, so many ores.
Yeah.
Are they all the same ore? That's a very structural choice.
It really is. Thank you for asking about that, because that for me is sort of like a key lever in the project. One, I think it was the first time I'd ever read the Orphic hymns. So one nice thing about being in this new area of the country was I moved from Wyoming to the California desert, but I knew so many poets either in the desert or in San Diego or LA that I was finally getting to meet to talk to people in person whose work I'd known for a really long time. And somebody gave me the Orphic hymns to read, and the language was so lush, like ivy covered and the horned god, and a lot of these like phrases came out of there and just really started populating my landscape in my head in a way that was so soothing, and a real antidote to a lot of the harsh things that had been kind of in my brain stage. And so that was happening. And so I was thinking about that. I was thinking about Orpheus a lot. I was reading friends' screenplay about Orpheus. I was thinking about those trips to the underworld. I was thinking about like Kathy Acker's Eurydice in the Underworld, which I prefer to maybe most other tellings. Although I do like Eurydice, I like the play, that modern retelling. But yeah, so I was thinking about these things, and then because of all the interrupting and the ruptures and the stories, and that I was in this place where I really had to figure out how to rebuild a lot of my body and my life and my family and my friendship, just everything, and maybe the country, and some of the stuff we're all still feeling now. There was just so much ore in it. I just started obsessively asking people for advice, like what's your advice? What would you suggest? And I'm adding up all these ores, and I didn't know if it was helpful or worse. And then the pun with or like gold, right? And or like oars for rowing, right? And because these poems, one of my friends was reading these poems and was like, I'm going to suggest something you don't like, cut a lot of the language. And I was like, no, why would I do that? Maybe I'll just fill them up more. But then I was like, oh, but what if I put the word or? Every time I'd hit the end of one of these kind of gushes of language, I'd have this or, and the next gush would come up. And so it gave me something kind of like sea-like and rhythmic to follow. So yeah, and I can't recommend enough like thinking about your prepositions and conjunctions in poetry, but maybe in prose too, is like these amazing levers that like shift the weight and give meaning, these tiny little words that we're always overlooking, but they can be such radical good friends when you're writing, and like leaning into them somehow helps all the nouns and verbs like do their work in at least ways for me that feel like new things are happening. Like I didn't know I could make language do that, and then I figure it out, and that's really lovely.
Yeah, this will be our last question.
Hello, my child.
So both in this book and in your other books, you pull from your real life to make stories and images that are really very surreal. How is that like feel and work and the process behind it, and also the what's it like?
Yeah. So you have lived with me for 20 years and are my child, so you might have some insight here too. I think some of it probably started with maladaptive daydreaming. I think when I was very young and I started writing poetry, I was really drawn to Sylvia Plath, but not for the usual reasons. I was living as a femme person in the late 20th century, teenager. But what I loved about Plath wasn't the confession, and I actually thought it was bizarre that she was considered confessional, because it was like, this stuff is bananas and very surreal, and it's not like a literal like tally of what's happened in her life. She's like not a snake married to a zookeeper or whatever. And so I loved that because it gave me this ultimate privacy, but it also allowed my my stories about myself or my feelings or whatever that seemed to me like not when you tell the story of what's going on with you, somebody can be sympathetic, but the feeling when you go to the doctor and you're like, this hurts, and it just doesn't feel like it communicated the pain in the least. And so surrealism was something that allowed me to communicate the scale of my feeling and my lived experience and what's sort of inarticulable about how people relate to each other. So it was really exciting and cleansing and made me feel like vindicated, or would soften me, or would just change my experience of my own lived experience in more radical ways. And when I read things like that, I felt like this is articulating the inarticulable. Like finally there's an image, sort of like that China Mieville book, Embassy Town, where, people, these aliens need humans to create analogies and metaphors for them to express things. And so I'd have these moments where nothing eased the feeling, good or bad, that I was having until some surreal image captured and delivered it. And then I think through that you can tell a story that's personal and national and all of these things, and it becomes kind of allegorical or mythical or like a fairy tale, right? This story about transformation that we can tell and retell in all of these different ways. And also it protects the innocent.